In 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with barely 37,000 men. Ahead of him stands the Persian Empire, richer, larger, and stronger. In Asia, he doesn't find Darius. He finds satraps, fleets, fortresses, and an entire system built to stop him. At Granicus, he nearly dies. At Issus, he drives Darius into flight. And in between, he learns one hard truth. Victory means dismantling Persia, not just chasing Darius across Asia. So how does a 20-year-old king turn one landing in Asia into the beginning of Persia's end? In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander leaves Europe for Asia with an army of about 37,000 men, roughly 32,000 infantry, and just over 5,000 cavalry. Before he departs, tradition says he gives away much of his property to his companions. When they ask what he's keeping for himself, he answers, hope. But this expedition isn't driven by glory alone. Alexander is continuing Philip's project, presenting himself as a leader of the Greek world against Persia and seeking prestige, plunder, and long-term political stability. Taking the war into Asia also keeps both the army and Greece focused firmly east. What he's facing is no ordinary kingdom. It's the Persian Empire, a state of perhaps 25 to 35 million people, compared with roughly 4 to 6 million in mainland Greece. It's an immense system, organized into satrapies, able to raise taxes, troops, and resources on a continental scale. Militarily, the gap is just as stark. Persia can mobilize armies of up to 100,000 men. In short, Alexander is attacking an empire vastly larger than his own kingdom. The main crossing is between Sestos and Abydos, barely 2.5 miles apart. Most of the army makes passage on about 160 triremes and transport ships, but Alexander turns even this crossing into a political and symbolic act. At Elaeus, he honors Protesilaus, the first Greek to die after landing in Asia in the Trojan War. The message is obvious. He wants his own landing to be luckier. And the instant he touches Asian soil, he hurls a spear into the ground, as if the conquest begins with that first step. Next comes Ilium, ancient Troy, about 19 miles from Abydos. At Ilium, Alexander doesn't act like a tourist. He's trying to step into myth. He offers a sacrifice to Athena, lays his own arms in the temple, and visits Achilles' tomb. Hephaestion honors Patroclus. None of it is accidental. Alexander is telling himself, his men, and the Greek world that his war in Asia begins where their greatest war, the Trojan War, began. Alexander enters Asia not just as a conqueror, but determined to rewrite history. At first, Alexander doesn't face Darius. He faces the satraps and commanders of Asia Minor. Before the clash, the Persian leadership gathers at Zelea, and Memnon of Rhodes emerges as the clearest mind in the room. He argues against an immediate battle. Instead, he wants to strip the land bare, deny the Macedonians food and fodder, and wear Alexander down on land, then exploit Persian superiority at sea. Soon after, at Miletus, the Persian fleet can field about 400 ships, against roughly 160 for the Greeks. Memnon has grasped the war's central point, but his plan is rejected. The satraps choose to fight at once, and it will prove a mistake. In late May 334 BC, the two armies meet on the Granicus River, about 60 miles from Troy. The river isn't wide, but its banks are steep, sometimes 10 to 13 feet high. A frontal attack means scrambling up under direct enemy fire. Alexander does it anyway, throwing himself into the melee. The sources stress the point. He fights in person, and the battle nearly costs him his life. He's struck on the head and almost cut down from behind, until Cletus the Black steps in and saves him. It's the kind of moment that turns instantly into legend. After the victory, the Persian hold on the region starts to crack. Alexander sends 300 Persian suits of armor to Athens, dedicated to all the Greeks except the Spartans, a propaganda move. Then the Persian structure in Western Asia Minor begins to collapse. Duscalium is evacuated. Sardis surrenders without a fight. Mithranes, the garrison commander, hands over the city, the citadel, and the treasury. You can already see Alexander's two sides: the warrior king who nearly dies in the river, and the politician who turns a tactical win into the opening of Western Asia Minor.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
After the Granicus, Alexander turns to the sea. If Persia keeps the Aegean ports, the expedition remains exposed. So he goes from Sardis to Ephesus, calls back the exiles, tears down the pro-Persian oligarchy, and restores democracy. In Ephesus, liberation and conquest coincide. Alexander replaces local elites with an order loyal to him. From Ephesus, he marches south towards Miletus, about 28 miles away. And there, his strategy comes into focus. The Greek fleet holds the island of Lad with about 160 ships. 3 days later, the Persian fleet arrives with 400. The balance of power at sea is stark, roughly 2.5 to 1 in Persia's favor. Parmenion proposes risking a naval battle. Alexander refuses. He knows he is weaker at sea, and he decides to defeat the Persian fleet on land by taking away its ports, arsenals, anchorages, and allied cities. It is a crucial choice. From this point on, the campaign is no longer a sequence of battles, but a systemic war against the Achaemenid Empire. He then moves on to Halicarnassus, about 35 miles from Miletus. Here, he launches the expedition's first major siege. Defending the city is Memnon of Rhodes, the most capable commander serving Persia in Asia Minor. The resistance is fierce. Fighting turns urban and comes in brutal waves until parts of the city burn and the Persian defensive system in the region finally breaks. This is where Ada of Caria enters the story. She hands him Alinda, adopts him as her son, and after the capture of Halicarnassus, she is restored as governor. Alexander understands that military victory alone is not enough. He must also appear legitimate. To stabilize Caria, he leaves behind 3,000 infantry and 200 cavalry. Yet the war is far from over. Memnon escapes and carries the conflict into the Aegean, where Persia remains strong. Darius gives him command of the fleet and the whole coastline. Memnon seizes Chios and moves to Lesbos, where he lays siege to the northern city of Mytilene. After Halicarnassus, Alexander continues along the coast of Lycia and Pamphylia to block every anchorage. Telemussus, Xanthus, Patara, and Phaselis are drawn into his system. It's a deliberate choice. Control the southern coast of Asia Minor and make the enemy fleet unusable. In winter, he reaches Gordium in Phrygia. It's not only a new stage of the campaign, but a symbol. In the citadel stands the famous cart of Gordius, tied with a knot that tradition says only the man destined to rule Asia can loosen. The best-known version says Alexander cuts it with his sword. With that gesture, he casts himself as the man destiny has chosen to open Asia's road. At Gordium, reinforcements arrive. About 3,000 infantry, 300 cavalry, 200 Thessalians, and 150 Eleans. Alexander passes through Ancyra, crosses Cappadocia, goes beyond the Halys River, and heads for the Cilician gates. He takes them with a night march so swift that the Persian garrison flees. He then moves towards Cilicia across the Anatolian plateau and the mountain passes, more than 285 miles in a straight line. And at Tarsus, the most unexpected blow comes. Alexander, exhausted by the march and perhaps after plunging into the icy Cydnus, falls gravely ill. The doctors think him lost, except Philip the Acarnanian, who prepares a remedy. At that moment, a letter arrives from Parmenion, one of his generals, warning that the doctor may be bribed by the enemy. It's not certainty, only suspicion. Alexander chooses to trust anyway. He takes the cup, drinks the medicine, and at the same time hands Philip the letter so he can read it. It's a powerful scene. It doesn't prove Philip is a traitor, it proves the opposite. And it shows how Alexander is willing to risk everything, even when the threat doesn't come from the battlefield. At this point, the war shifts. Until now, Alexander has beaten satraps, garrisons, and coastal cities. Now, however, the great king truly enters the story, Darius himself. Before that, something decisive happens. In 333 BC, Memnon of Rhodes dies, the best Persian strategist at sea. With him, Persia loses its clearest strategist. And from that point onward, the war passes more directly into Darius's own hands. The Persian king moves down towards Syria with a great royal army. Ancient sources give enormous figures, 300,000, even 600,000 men. They are clearly exaggerated. Even so, Darius still commands forces far superior to Alexander. A deserter, Amyntas, warns him, it's better to force Alexander to fight in open country where numbers really make the difference. But Darius chooses differently. He chooses the Achaemenid gates, outflanks the army, and finds himself in Alexander's rear. He takes Issus, where the Persians capture and kill the sick it left behind. At that point, the situation reverses. Alexander is no longer advancing toward the enemy because the enemy is now behind him. The two armies are forced to turn and face each other. Between Tarsus and Issus lie about 75 miles, but the decisive point is not the distance. It is the ground. Before the Pinaris, between the sea and the heights, the space narrows. And in that narrow space, much of the Persian numerical advantage is squeezed out. Alexander understands it immediately. On the left, near the sea, Parmenion, the most experienced commander in his army, comes under heavy pressure. On the right, Alexander strengthens the striking wing, angles part of the line toward the heights, and then attacks decisively toward the Persian center. This is the key moment. Around Darius fights his closest men, the king's kinsmen and part of the Persian guard. But when the Macedonian attack reaches the center, not even that chosen corps can hold. The great king loses the field. He flees, first by chariot and then on horseback, leaving behind his bow, shield, cloak, and royal chariot. When the battle is over, Alexander visits the wounded. honors the dead, and then treats Darius' family with respect. The mother, wife, and children retain their rank. Tradition preserves an episode. Sisygambis, Darius' mother, mistakes Hephaestion for Alexander because he is taller. Alexander does not humiliate her. He reassures her. It is a small detail, but it matters. He is no longer only the avenger of the Greeks. He begins to look like a claimant to the throne of Asia. Yet the war is not finished. Darius is alive. The Persian fleet is still in play, and the Achaemenid Empire has not collapsed. The choice now is different. Pursue the fleeing king, or conquer his empire piece by piece. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. In the next video, we'll see Alexander push south, face the siege of Tyre, and change the face of war. Because after Issus, victory still isn't enough.